we're 6 days away now from those midterm elections, and we don't know what the results will be, but there are a lot of people who are predicting that the Republicans may regain a majority in the House. We welcome now someone whose job might change if that happened. He's Republican Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio. He's the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. So, Congressman, thank you so much for being with us.
David, thank you for having me.
I don't want to get ahead of the polls. I know you don't either. But just in case the Republicans did get a majority, what difference would it make in your life? What difference would it make on the Intelligence Committee, for example?
Right. Well, the Intelligence Committee itself has very, very important functions that go right to the heart of our national security. And our goal will be to return the committee back to its national security functions and goals, to be a resource for intelligence in Congress for policymaking and decision-making. We were hijacked by the impeachment processes before that both divided the committee and gave a very partisan environment. Our focus will be, we have some real adversaries who are self-identified and they're targeting the United States. How can we make certain that our national security is safe and that our allies are strong?
Well, I'm really interested that that's your answer, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is, I can imagine a world in which the Republicans take over and say, okay, we've got it now. Let's do a bunch of investigations the way the Democrats did a lot of investigations. It's never clear to me what comes out of those investigations. Are you saying you'd avoid things like Hunter Biden and things like that?
Well, certainly in the Intelligence Committee. Now, there are components of those, obviously, that go to abuses in the intelligence community, and those have to have oversight by the Intelligence Committee itself. But the more partisan, those things that are charged, I think there are committees that will take those up. But our focus is going to be more on governance. How do we get this economy back on track, lower inflation, make certain our border is secure, make certain that we're responding to our adversaries. That's going to be our primary focus.
And what about Ukraine? I mean, I know you've just been to Ukraine recently. Yes. You've been over there. You've talked with President Zelensky, not the first time. You have been clear, as Kevin McCarthy, your minority leader, has said, we got to avoid waste. We can't have a blank check.
Absolutely.
I get that. I think everybody gets that. But can you identify waste thus far in some of the money that's been appropriated and sent over to Ukraine?
Sure, absolutely. And intuitively, people get this. So, when I was sitting across from President Zelensky, he asked the same question. And I said, we're not going to pass a $40 billion bill to get $8 billion to Ukraine. And he knows that's happened. All of the headlines were $40 billion bill. Ukraine got a very, very small portion of that. The other aspect is humanitarian aid. We take weapon systems and we give them directly to Ukraine. We actually take our humanitarian aid and we give it to United Nations. Already, that is a cut that happens in the aid that goes to Ukraine. And their processes are not the most successful. We have a functioning sovereign government that we can provide aid to. Humanitarian aid needs to go directly to them, not through the United Nations.
Let me ask a different question here that would be very pertinent, I think, if the Republicans take over, and that's the debt ceiling. We've got a debt ceiling that we're going to be bumping up against, and there's a lot of reporting, including from Bloomberg, that perhaps the Republicans would hold that hostage to get some other reforms that might be good reforms or bad reforms. At the same time, President Biden has warned that would be really chaotic. This is what President Biden had to say.
They're going to shut down the government by not providing the votes to pay our federal debt to other countries in the world. This is irresponsible. Nothing would create more chaos and do more damage to the American economy than playing around with whether we pay our national bills.
Congressman, your response.
Well, what's been dangerous for the American economy is the out-of-control spending from the Biden administration that has resulted in this, what will be years-long inflation that we're dealing with, and these recessionary pressures that are going to result from these increases in interest rates. What the president needs to do is come to the table and negotiate with Republicans, because if we win in November, either the House or the House and the Senate, he's no longer going to have, in effect, the blank check for himself and for his party's goals. That spending is going to have to be tamped down in order to lower inflation for families who are trying to put food on the table. And certainly that means he's going to have to negotiate. The Obama administration did not do that very well, resulted in a couple government shutdowns. I think President Biden has to understand this economy needs attention, and we're going to be his partner in doing that.
You've mentioned inflation, and goodness knows that's on voters' minds. We hear that every poll we see. It's about inflation. What can the Republicans do if they gain majority in the House? Is it a matter of stopping new legislation and new spending, or are there affirmative things that can be done?
There are affirmative things that can be done, but it is stopping new spending. I mean, what has happened with the Biden administration spending, especially with their post-COVID act, there are billions of dollars that are in state legislators and local governments that have not yet been spent. They're going to be spent over the next several years and certainly provide inflationary pressures. At the same time, you have the infrastructure bill; those billions haven't been spent. The president's attempt at setting aside student debt; those would have inflationary pressures. It's trying to get us back to how do we fund the functions of government that are necessary, our national defense, our security, and how do we get this economy working again, our supply chain working again. That will make a big impact also on inflation.
Congressman, it's great having you here. Thank you so much for taking the time and dropping by. That is Ohio Congressman Mike Turner.